Technology to mitigate the risk of pandemic. And also, I would like to welcome all the participants for the session. Then I heartily welcome Dr. P. A. Habib Rahman sir, Director of MES IMAT, for the welcome address. Sir, please.
Thank you, Shilpa, and welcome to Ms. Labi George and other faculty colleagues and students who have come for this wonderful program. So, good morning and welcome once again. So, the technology as on date, people are looking towards it in a big way as a panacea for all the problems that everybody is facing at every point of time. Rather, the job of technology is to mitigate the seriousness of each problem by devising various methods by which the life of individuals can become a little more comfortable. And in this respect, the current pandemic, which is supposed to be the biggest one for the last 80 years or even more than that. That is what is predicted, because after the Great Depression of 1928, there was nothing of this massive nature that has affected everyone across the world, big and small, rich and poor. So everything has come to a standstill. On such occasions, everybody is seriously looking towards technology, because technology is the source towards which people are having a lot of expectations, especially the way it is going in after the fourth industrial revolution and all such things. So to talk on this serious topic, we have a distinguished guest, Ms. Labi George, Senior Fellow, Product Marketing, Kerala Startup Mission, with a vast expertise and experience in various facets, including finding solutions in several MNC companies and advising, say, organizations as to how serious issues of this magnitude has to be dealt with and all. Madam, on behalf of MES IMAT, its managing committee, and their staff colleagues and their participants, it's my proud privilege to welcome you for today's webinar on scope of technology to mitigate the risk of pandemic. I would also like to extend a hearty welcome to all the faculty colleagues who have come accepting our invitation, as also the students for this program. A word of appreciation has to be recorded in respect of the performance and contribution made by the IEDC, MES IMAT, especially the nodal officer, Mr. Jibin, and the coordinator, Mr. Munir, for conducting this program. So once again, I extend a hearty welcome to one and all, and request Ms. Labi George to take over the session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for the wonderful welcome, and thank you students and faculty and others who have joined for this interesting topic, which is very close to my heart and which I have been learning and trying to relearn and erase whatever has been taught, because this particular pandemic has put us all in a completely different research and learning mode to erase whatever we have learned and come up with new solutions. With that, I'll start my session. I'm going to share the presentation I made. Just let me know if, like, when the presentation is visible. I'll just go off camera just to make sure that we don't have bandwidth issues. Okay. Can you see? Are you able to see? Can you see my?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, visible.
Is it large enough to see?
Yes, madam, it's visible.
Yeah. Okay. So it was interesting when the MES directors called me for a session. There was two topics. One was startups, like how the startups are going to manage post-pandemic, and there was another one which is how the technology is going to affect. Startup is what we currently have is a technology startup where I'm working in Kerala Startup Mission, and just like every business has been affected, it is going to affect startups also. So I thought the scope of engagement is going to be lower, and I wanted to dive into a larger topic, which is going to be the core of every business or every even NGO work, every relief work, everything what we are going to do, that is going to be the core of it, which is technology. Until now, technology was like, maybe a fancy word for some, thinking you don't have to learn technology or you don't have to enable technology, especially small businesses and enterprises where, they thought they could do legacy model of business, like, just the paper and files, or, you just go and talk to the salesperson, or, who is going to do technology, because our the business and products is for 60-year-olds. We don't want technology. So, everything of all those technology lapses has been corrected, and it has been escalated 5 or 6 years. So, Kerala has jumped at least 5 or 6 years ahead of what we should have done 10 or 15 years back. We have jumped ahead of the curve, which is actually a good thing, even though we have a very terrible situation of increasing COVID, COVID presence, and also there are a lot more people being affected by it. But that is how, only a major disruption can change the mindset and culture, which culture is the hardest part for any organization, enterprise, governance, population to change. So this is a cultural change. And the cultural change is going to be enabled, and it will be on the technology platform. It is going to, the technology platform is going to be the vehicle of this cultural change. Because without that, businesses cannot exist anymore. You are not able to give healthcare. You're not able to do governance. So governments, policy makers, everyone has to be on a very on the food, trying to think like, what all has to happen in the next 10 or 20 years. With that, I'll start my session. I hope I am loud enough. If you have any trouble or issues hearing me, let me know, and I will start. I'll be glad to interrupt the session and restart it again. Can I start?
Yes, madam.
I hope you can see the slide. Yes, yeah. So, it's more than 89. World has been shaken like what has happened now. It was the Spanish flu. We had smaller incidents like anthrax. We had smallpox, which was 1927. It was eradicated in 1970s. We had the plague, bubonic plague, which is called the Black Death. And now you can see the small screen where people are actually covering their faces. So, now you see yourself, right? You see yourself in the mirror, similar, which some of these images we would have never seen unless otherwise this happened. We went and checked back, okay, what happened in Spanish flu, or how did people actually resist to communicable diseases? And you can go and check all those historical pictures And you can see the same way, nothing has changed. People are there everywhere. People are wearing masks. People are there in all kind of hospitals, like, community hospitals. And this is almost a similar way, especially that, but there are a lot of things have changed, but human resistance has been the same way. We are trying to resist what is been attacking us. And I am very positive on how human beings evolve, and we are brilliant and brighter than any machines. So we come up with different, very indigenous methods how to overcome a very crisis and a disaster. This is a crisis and disaster on humanity. Population is going to dwindle. The older population has already dwindled in Italy. Italy had lot more older population. Most of them died without seeing their grandparents, or without getting their last right. So what could have how we could have managed, or how we could have resisted this, actually came a long way back. People were talking about this 5 or 6 years back, but we never listened, right? So we never listen until something hit us. So that exactly has happened. People, as you have heard, Bill Gates was talking about it. Obama had a research plan. Many people, like World Health Organization, but we were all taking it very slow. Now it has come to a standstill. Okay, now you have to do things which you were supposed to do 5 years ahead, 5 years back. So that's the situation right now. And then this is a reality check on 24th June of, like, we have 9 million confirmed cases, and we have 33,000 new cases in world over. This is from WHO. And then we have you can see the death, how it is going up, and it's not going to go down until some drastic measures are taken. And nobody knows what those drastic measures are, other than complete lockdown, which everyone tried for some 2 or 3 months, but it is not like, you cannot have a complete lockdown of people. We are human beings as social animals. We need to see people, we need to go to places, we need to buy stuff. So that is not going to work, but we will have to do it in a more capacity management way, because coronavirus is mainly about capacity management. It's not about, like, people are dying as soon as you get it. So it's a capacity management, and that exactly where we are failing. If it was a disease where you could get a cure or something immediately, or someone would die immediately, there could have been a different way of management. But right now we are in a I would say a supply chain disruption, and that is what is how do you deal with so many human beings? That is the exact issue that is affecting us, just like it has affected the global pandemic. So what is GCBR? GCBR is the Global Catastrophic Biological Resistance of a pandemic. So there are different types of issues that will affect the world. I don't know whether you have heard about you heard about dengue fever, right? Dengue fever is also a pandemic. Also, it it's a communicable disease, but it's not. It doesn't come under. It doesn't have a global effect or a global catastrophe. But the Spanish flu is a global catastrophe, and it has to. That is the world-changing. But once a GCBR event occurs, it's a world-changing event, because smallpox was something like that, where someone who actually contracts smallpox, it can even affect 90% of the people can die. So those kind of effects actually affect everywhere in the globe. And because we are prone to globalization right now, and we have everyone traveling everywhere, you cannot restrict, and unless otherwise every person actually gets cured, or every person is immune, this is going to keep on affecting, as you can see, China had to shut schools again, so it is not going to go away. You cannot wish it to go away. The best thing is you put on your thinking hat on how to how to resist this. That is how you have to that is all how we have been doing. When a crisis happens, you just put on your thinking hat, you do the best possible solutions, gather the best knowledge, and see what can be done. Okay. Whenever I talk about technology, especially to students and peers, my biggest fear has always been too much of technology without a ground reality. Technology, just like a jargon, just like you just put a giant spaceship in front of your in your carport, it's not going to come used to you, right? So, technology should not be intrusive. And a product design which is intrusive to people instead of helping them is actually a bad product and something that we should be rejecting outright. Technology should be an enabler, as I have always been preached about technology as an enabler. It should be seamless and it should be invisible. You should not know that you're using technology. It should be that seamless, and that's where you have to also know about how to do ingenuity, like how to reinvent technology, keeping on reinventing how it can be more useful. Because the first time you are making a product, it might be a giant spaceship, but coming down, how do you reiterate, you come with more better product designs, and then it just goes to a matchbox level where people can actually use it. So the continuous ingenuity and adaptability is one of the key things technology has to come into terms with, and that especially during larger footprints events like these, where you can't afford. You need to be very nimble. You need to be very nimble in productivity. You need not productivity, in production. You need to be very high in productivity. You need to be very penny pinching on your wallet. So all these things actually should the technology should improve, so that it is not a giant footprint of product you are putting out there. It's a smaller footprint, and it can come used to it. And until now, most of you are students, and until now, what all has been taught to you, everything that has been taught to you is, I'm pretty sure it's just 550 years of data. Everything that has been taught to you either has to be completely realigned, starting from economics, starting from literature, everything, filmmaking. Forget about other things, very things like soft skills. You think everything, how do you behave, how do you adapt, all that has to be changed, and changed disruptively and abruptly, because this is not going to wait, right? So you have to change it, and you have to relearn, and sometimes you have to unlearn some of the things. I'm pretty sure 50-60% of the things you learn have to be unlearned, and then you have to re-skill yourself, and this all has to happen in the next 3 or 6 months, or even 1 year. So you don't even have time, and which also makes it very challenging. And I'm thinking, and I'm hoping the generation that is graduating right now will be one of the most best innovators, because you guys are fixed with a very complicated problem, which you are going to solve in the next years, and that is going to help humankind. So you have a very interesting problem. You all have the opportunity to be innovators, and that's where this pandemic is, the crux of the pandemic is, or the core of the pandemic is, that particular thing. How it is now, the magic band is in your hands, how to change the world, right? We talk about how to change the world, and this is your right term, how to change the world, and everywhere it touches everything. How you even interact with your parents would have changed. How you go out have changed. To what you're reading have changed, right? So technology is a paradigm of how it's all going to happen to you. And I have found some interesting research. I've been doing a lot of research work and backend on how technology, how smaller companies has been responding to this. And then I found out there are 40% of technology companies who are providing technology solutions are not aware that how to be nimble in technology, how to use the best technology to move their organizations. So they are still stuck in the legacy era, and they are producing technology, but they are not using the technology themselves, which is easily available. So those organizations are either have to change quickly, or they are going to just die, right? So even organizations that use technology, that produce some of the very complex technology products, their organization might be in a very legacy model. That is the question I pose. Even if you're producing a technology, even if your entire business is dependent on a technology platform, how do you work on your organization? How is your organization working? Do you have enough data to know how the employee is? Or do you have enough to do different kind of work? Is your work sliced in a way where some people from remote places can work? So these are a lot of questions everybody is now trying to address, and hopefully we will have more solutions as we progress. So how do you, in 2019, John Hopkins University actually came up, no, 2018, I'm sorry. John Hopkins University actually came up with a very detailed research based on George Helmer's, the Helmer Catechism. It's called the Helmer Catechism. This poses 9 questions on what are you trying to do, how is it done today, what are the limits, what is new in your approach. These are some of the things. It's called an innovator's checklist. If you're trying to come up with something, there are these 9 questions. If you're able to answer, and if you're able to communicate that answer to others, that is the best way to do a business plan, or do a pitch a new pitch to about a technology or about any solution you have. Actually, John Hopkins University adapted that framework in 2018, and I think they got some 50 experts around, and they're trying to address what happens if a global pandemic occurs. That's the exact question they were trying to address in 2018, which actually came to a lot of use because they were trying to address a lot of new technology aspects, how the new technology innovations are helping, and which is like a Bible for any startup right now to see what is going to happen. Whatever problem you are working on, or whatever technology or whatever business you are working on, that has to be the Bible right now, because it has actually interestingly laid out this entire scenario 2 years back, right? So that is the kind of prediction they have done. I don't even think they thought like something like this is going to happen, but thankfully there were experts good enough to have a longer sight into future, and address some of the futuristic problems that is going to happen. And they have come up with one, I think it's a 78 or 90 page document. It's actually freely available in the web. On what should happen such a pandemic is going to affect the human society, and especially from a technological aspect. They have mainly looked at only technology, and that is where they have come up with this create a consortium of technology developers, public health practitioners, policy makers tasked with understanding pressing problems surrounding pandemics management and GCBRs, and jointly develop technology solutions. See, this is one of the biggest technology development. You give a particular requirement set to a technology groups, they will come up with completely something different. So you are asking them to develop a red button, they will come up with something like a green button, because there is a huge gap in communication. There are a lot of jargons that are always thrown in, and they come up with that is how products are not they're not usable to a user, because if you're away from the user, you are not you won't be able to make a good product. So it has to have what can governments do, what can a doctor do, or what can policymaker contribute. So you have to come up with your requirements, which is actually a equal contribution from everywhere. It's not like you are actually trying to solve a complicated problem that is affecting humanity. It is not a technology problem, it is a technology solution. Okay, the solution is should be on technology based, but the problem exists in the other people who are going to use it. So they have beautifully come up with this 80-page document on what all technology can be used. I am going to summarize some of those, so that I would like you guys to go and just to make your pick your interest, so that you guys can go and read, and if you're interested to take, because I can't cover all that in this short session. And I want you to look at this chart, how China. This is from the National Health Commission of China, and you can see how technology was used, and how that it was applied. So you can see the technologies you are pretty sure you're hearing about all this cloud computing, big data, IoT, and how those were put into use of how the information is delivered, screening. The Chinese police came up with something called smart helmets, and then predictive analytics on AI, and then what can it is the way it is has affected China 3 months back, or affected US 2 months back. that is not going to be the same case, right? Because they have learned from their experiences, and they are going to come up with different type of solutions, like how to arrest this pandemic, or but you cannot have very quick solutions, right? Because this is an enterprise model. You cannot have a small mobile app to contain all this, right? So you need to have a lot of big technologies, very complex technologies. You don't have people to do stuff. So this, as I said, this is a huge opportunity where you just skill yourself, and and this is a world right now where you want to learn. You have all these open universities. You have the entire MIT syllabus out. You have Udemy, you have Coursera. You can learn in smaller chunks what is an AI, or what is machine learning, what is all big data. So you can learn yourself. So this is an era where information is easily available. It's actually too much information, and then you have to learn how you can actually start reinventing, or create a new wheel itself. But because whatever has worked 20 years back, or 10 years back, or 5 years back is not going to work. As simple as people don't want to use debit cards, because debit cards you are going to use a keypad where multiple people have touched, right? So that can actually cause viral transmissions. So and the memory of the children right now who are growing up is always, they are going to be very careful of there is going to be a pandemic, because this generation now is imposed with this is how you have to behave. They are being restricted for behavior which they were not used to. So this is going to be in the memory of the child, which is going to be a teenager and an adult, that is going to have the consumer behavior patterns of how I'm going to purchase a product. I'll have to make sure that it is not going to, I'm purchasing a product, it's not going to expose me to more risk of getting a disease. So this is actually a problem or a solution technology has to resolve, where you have to think about the next 20 years, who is going to be a customer. If I'm going to be in 20 years of business, I need to understand who is going to be my customer for the next 20 years. So this next 20 years, how this new generation is going to come up with, and what all things they are going to demand, is going to be completely different from what you have learned, or what the sales and marketing, or what the business models have taught you for the past 50 years. So that's where you have to put on your thinking cap, put on your research caps, and then start exploring what all can be done. What is my opportunity? This is an opportunity. The ocean has become blue again. Instead of a red ocean, I don't know whether you have heard about red ocean, blue ocean. Red ocean is where it's saturated market. Now the ocean and blue ocean it's not a saturated market. That is your niche market. So now the ocean has become blue again, where there's a ton of opportunities for anyone who cares to listen, who cares to make product, who cares to know about technology. So you should not take it as a what is going to happen to my exams, or what is going to happen to my career. This is actually a brilliant boom of technological revolution is going to come. So you just have to jump into that revolution wagon as you keep on skilling and reskilling yourself. So these are some of the terms we heard, and you thought these were all fancy terms, you just need to know a little bit of this and that, and who is going to use some of this. I mean, there is a lot of companies that were working on augmented reality for the past 5 years. Most of them are not profitable, because you don't want to wear glasses where you can actually see, visible, touch people. Why do you want augmented reality or virtual reality classes, right? But that is going to change. We would all want the learning, your colleges, your education system. It will all change into enable or augment how you're going to learn. So say in 2018, when there was a floods, the children lost school days for some around 1 month, I think. So now children might not lose school, because they're all started to the e-learning process, and they're all getting used to this process. So you are giving children as small as 6 years old with laptops and computers. Imagine that is something you are supposed to give them around 18, right? And so you have to push them around into 18 years ahead. Imagine what that child growing up is going to demand on technology front. So your old technology or your old ways of solving a problem is not going to come in handy if you have to start something up, and how your research has to change. So when you're doing something, you have to always make sure, right, your next 10 years, how it's going to look. Otherwise, you shouldn't build anything. If you're just going to plan to exist only for 2 years, right? So that is how you have to think, like, what kind of memory this new generation is going to, what kind of consumer I'm going to face in the next 10 years. And these are all things that is going to help you, because you have a ton of things that is ready to help. Only thing is you have to make sure that you use it wisely and use it in a way that is going to solve the human problems. You should not solve any other problem other than a human problem, because no one else is going to buy, right? The human beings are going to buy, or human beings are going to support, or human beings are wanting the technology. So, you should only be focusing on solving human problems. So this is what John Hopkins had come, and right now, like, as everyone, if you look at any of these universities, any of this big 5 consulting firms, everybody is throwing out a lot of papers telling, like, the next is the innovation boom that is going to come. It might be in the Valley, because Valley is very good for innovation, and they have a very high standard of innovation. I don't know, maybe it might be in as small as a place called Kerala. So, it is up to the generation how you're handling the opportunities. And so, these are some of the, I have to refer my notes, 1 second. So these are some of the generic things I have put out here, which are going to help, or which need to be solved. Remember, none of these are solved. Okay, so these are the problem statements right now. And one of these problem statement has 100 or 1,000 of different applications and solutions. So, it's a very fertile ground so for you to start innovation, and it's a very virgin market. So right now, these are some of the things, and I'll go through some of it. I have made some notes. So early disease detection, what does it actually mean? It's for ubiquitous genomic sequencing, where they want, like, near real-time characteristics of a pathogen. That has not been done. It is just in a research mode. And then you have, like, how is H1N1 as serious as corona, or whether a new viral strain is coming, is it as serious as some of the old ones? So these kind of research, it is going to take a which used to take a lot of time. Now you can plug in technology like AI, because AI needs to go through all the older diseases. You can train your AI, you can train your robotics to understand whether this particular strain of disease is going to be it's going to have a similar case of deaths, right? So this is where the genomic sequencing is going to come, aided with technology, which faster technology, which is going to give you a much faster results. Probably, if you have a very smart AI engine, if my turnaround time is in 20 hours, I'm going to predict, okay, a new virus has come. Is it going to give me all this kind of different problems? A coronavirus has come, then you are the key, right? So that is where you would want to work on. And then something like surveillance and monitoring. So you can check the environment, right? I don't know whether you guys remember, or you guys may be too small, of the Bhopal gas tragedy, right? So there is a lot of IoT or drones who are now actually looking at gas pipelines, whether there is any gas actually leakage in these giant plants or nuclear plants. But now it's a time for the drones to start looking at the environments to check whether there are more pathogens to come, whether a particular population is affected by different any kind of communicable diseases. So there will be, now you will be used to seeing drones. I know you have all seen the police drones, which were quite funny, but you will start to see drones as small as as small as a dragonfly, which is actually inspecting the environment constantly, understanding whether this environment, there is any pathogen, there is any bacteria, there is any new virus that is entering this particular zone. So these, as I said, these are all emerging technologies. None of this is solid. So these are some of the areas we need to start working on. And then we have something called remote sensing for agricultural monitoring. Is like agricultural, livestock. These are the kind of things that is actually giving sustainability to human beings. So everything has to be now, all agricultural plantations and farms, everyone will be assisted, has to be assisted with some kind of monitoring, like whether the climate change is going to affect it, or as you saw, there was a swarm of dragonflies, I forgot, a swarm of bees or something like that, affecting corns, wheat production. So since things like that, how we are going to, like, you start to predict, and like, in Kerala, people actually look at rains, or whether the flood situation, stuff like that. So there is going to be a lot of rigorous monitoring, because you lose your food, you're losing your food. The world has actually come a long way to eradicate poverty, with people and production disrupted. We are going to slowly go down the path of having more poverty, right? So we have to do more smart agriculturing. We have to do more productive agriculturing. We have to bring more smart supply chain of livestock, food cycles and stuff like that. So that is one huge area of agricultural, surveillance and monitoring. And you need a lot of agricultural scientists actually telling, okay, this is what we need. Say I am a drone, I'm a person who is making a drone. I would have no clue what an agricultural farm is supposed to have the user requirements, right? So that's where you work with the agricultural scientists, understanding, like, what do I need to monitor. So this is how you have to come up. This should be a marriage between a technologist and the people who are actually developing the use cases. If once that is done, it's going to be it will be a perfect marriage of solving a problem. And then infectious diseases diagnostic, it's like, you're going to, you see, like, we would have all heard about, like, one, you can only take this many samples, and it has to send to a virology institute in Pune. Then we started to have our own virology institutes. I mean, imagine, this is such a huge problem of, like, we are not even having enough test centers. And what is the issue with test centers? Because they have to have very complicated workflows of, like, even the smoke that goes out of, even the waste that goes out of those institutes has to be recycled in a manner which is not affecting the population. So that kind of legacy way of doing things has to change. And you give the specimen to a virology institute. It takes them I would say, like, even 2 days of understanding what is, whether a COVID test was positive or not is ridiculous, right? You should know that immediately. I mean, with this technology revolutions we have gone through, we should be able to know that immediately, right? So this is going to come up with smart, microfluid devices with a chip. So the chip will tell you, the chip is going to have a lot of memory, and the chip is going to tell you, okay, COVID positive or not. So as soon as you put the specimen out there, your sample, your blood sample, or your mucus sample, it's going to immediately flag. It's as easy as a pregnancy kit or something like that. So that is how the technology is trying to evolve, and that is one beautiful area of research where you can come up with a lot of IoT devices, or you can come up with a lot of biometric devices where to how to use that. And then something like a handheld spectrometer. So all these giant spectrometers you see, like, you cannot move one from the other. All this has to be separated. What is the bacteria? What is the virus? Everything has to, and that workflow is very painful. You need all these lab assistants working on all this, and they can get infected and stuff like that. So instead of that, handheld spectrometers where you should be able to do advanced diagnostic capabilities is some of the problems that is existing currently, which has to change rapidly. And the next 5 years, we don't want to be affected by something like, the world cannot take one more coronavirus after 2 years, right? We're all going to, the economy, as it starts to recover, say hopefully it's going to recover in the next 18 months. And as it starts to recover, one more coronavirus pandemic is going to be, it's going to be the end of it, right? So you have only a 2 years timeline of, developing technology or coming up with solutions as fast as you can. And these are some of the areas, right? The research should go on. And then there's something called cell-free diagnostics, where you can actually do an engineered DNA, and then something that is visible to the eye. Right now, nothing is visible, right? You don't know whether a bacteria exists or not, whether it's how it exists. So there are research that is going on to make it as visible to the eye. So it should be like a home health device. That's how the technology is trying to improve. And there is something called now the next one is a distributed manufacturing and supply chain, which I am actually very happy with. We have tried different sectors like healthcare. You have healthcare, you have hospitals everywhere, almost everywhere. You have schools everywhere, but you don't have supply chains everywhere, right? So you need to get something. You need to be manufactured in one country, then it has to come down to another country, which actually is a very bad resource management, because a country, because you have to import or export or do stuff, you are not the things are not available to you as fast as you need to. So now that everything was actually concentrated in China, or everything was actually concentrated in Mexico. The thing was, the entire supply chain originated from there, and that has to reach US, or that has to reach India, and you had to longer waiting lines, different type of qualities. So that is going to entirely disrupt. And now you cannot afford to have a supply chain right now like that. It's going to be distributed supply chain. So there will be smaller factories. There will be communities are going to have more job opportunities, because this is going to spread out how the supply chain, how the manufacturing has worked. So one of the aspects that is going to help manufacturing is 3D printers, right? Now there are very complex 3D printers where you can one 3D printer can produce multiple products at the same time itself. So how the manufacturing is going to disrupt, and how the supply chain, right? So say you want something to be produced, or you say India needs iPhones, right? So if India needs iPhones, what if it is manufactured in India itself? The cost is going to be down, right? The cost is going. You only have to send a design down. Whoever is doing the design, you have to send a design down, manufacture the iPhones here itself, and then the cost will be less. People will have more availability. I'm not saying you need iPhones. That is the most pressing thing of the country, but I'm just giving an example of a supply chain. So these things, people will have more affordability, and people will get more jobs, right? So that is what I am predicting. I am analyzing, because supply chain has to, and I have a very good example of 9/11. New York was the financial capital, right? And before 9/11, all the banks were there, and as soon as 9/11 happened, everything, all the banks moved out and spread across, because they had all these big walls under the World Trade Center. So once the World Trade Center was bombed, they had to move all their big walls of money to different regions. And now it is, even if there is a federal regulation that says that you cannot have everything at one point. So similarly, it's going to happen to supply chain also. You cannot have one production unit. You don't have one software. Call centers are there everywhere, from Philippines to India to everywhere, to production units of software in Bangalore, Mexico. Similarly, they are going to have supply chain divisions. Until now, that was never a case. Until now, it was all concentrated in one area. And that is going to change, which I think is going to give us a lot of opportunity in how to manage this distributed supply chain. Throws a lot of opportunities to tackle. And everything that is going to come across right now, have to think about a contactless system. I'm going to the doctor, okay? I'm going to the doctor's office. I will be in touch with a lot of people. Is that the same way you're going to, a healthcare provider is going to do medical service? It won't be. So there is going to be more contactless systems. And imagine, you now have a tablet where touch is a very, where you have a touch functionality, actually a very novel way, right? Even that is going to change. More or less, it's going to come at voice, or how you're, where you're looking at, how your view. You might have a glass to wear, where you're looking at, where you're thinking. All this is going to be captured. So when touch was such a nice, novel thing to do, and tabs are synonym with you're going to do a touch technology, it's going to completely change, and it's going to come up with a completely different way of doing or using technology. And then something called search capacity management. Search capacity management is we have telehealth, right? Because we could use some of the telehealth in Kerala itself. You had examples people who had a serious cough, or whether they didn't have to go to the hospital to check, right? Whether I have a cough and whether it was corona. So that is actually helped or aided in capacity planning. So you didn't have all these patients or prone people who are prone to diseases thrombing in hospitals or coming to hospitals and putting down that system, right? So you only have this many doctors, you only have this many nurses. So you don't have all the kind of people, because everybody will be scared, right? Whether I have that, whether I'm a fever. So you could consult the doctor, excuse me, in a telehealth manner, which actually where was much efficient in actually managing the capacities in the hospitals. And one of the things everybody is researching now is on a portable ventilator. Once you have a portable ventilator, patients can be sent back. So the more critical patients could be given more space. You cannot keep on building giant hospitals, right? That is not a right way to do it. You have to make sure that people are empowered with the things, and that's what surge capacity management is going to do. And that's where I said it is going to be the innovation boom for the next 20 years. You don't have to look back. You'll be keeping on making new things. And this is from the Johns Hopkins University, and some of the things I have spoken is here. As you can see, what is in early development. See, this is all in early development, which means there is a ton of space for you to start. And it's field ready. It's not field tested, it's just field ready. Self-spreading vaccines, microarray patches, ventilators, cell-free diagnostics, microfluidics, and all these are different things that is it's going to aid, and it's going to be high impact. You can see where robotics and healthcare is, and this is a nice sampling of products, or product array, I would say, which is going to aid you. And everything has to be you have to start thinking about a contactless solution. I mean, you won't be able to completely eradicate contactless contacts, but as soon as you start working on something, as soon as now you're trying to solve anything, from managers to workers, everybody has to think about how this can be done contactless, because that will be the best solution people would want to use or buy or take it forward. And then if you are, I don't know how many of you know the healthcare domain. Every business is going to be revolved around the healthcare at least next 10 years. If you are not into healthcare business right now, you're losing big time, because even if you have just a manufacturing office, or what are you manufacturing, you have to pivot to your products. All those solutions are going to be surrounding healthcare, because that is a key for human existence, right? So you cannot come up with something that is not going to solve a healthcare problem directly or indirectly. You might not solve a healthcare problem directly, but indirectly you might be solving a healthcare problem. So every business or every solution right now in the next 10 years has to be revolved around healthcare. I say as simple as opening children parks. It has to have a healthcare solution aided to open children's parks, right? So that's a solution somebody should be able to find and provide. So I mean, you have very simple solutions you don't have touch-free sanitizer. That's a very it is a 2-hour solution. Things like that that is going to aid people to come out more, enjoy the world more, and be more social human beings. So that is all surrounding how you are going to provide them healthcare. And then once you start into technology, it also has to know these are the things, right? These are the things that is helping you on what is how you are going to place the solutions, and something called living business models. Currently, how businesses do is they have this existing business model, which are very rigorous, which are enterprise models, which you cannot change. And then so right now in a pandemic, something like that happens. They don't know what to do. They have no clue what to do, because they are referring to their older books, they are referring to their older business models, and they don't know how this disruption is going to affect them. What should I do? Should I throw in more money, or should I hire more people, or should I fire more people? So there are at least 80% of the businesses are now in a mode where they have no clue what to do. So that's where you have to start with living business models, and there are 2 examples of living business models which I want to give. This is bringing more agility to the business model. In 2000, there was actually a fire in the factory where chips were being built for Nokia and Ericsson. And what Nokia did is Nokia immediately threw in a global technology team, and it started production in smaller areas. That way, it could capture the 3% of market of Ericsson by that disruption. And Ericsson didn't know what to do, because you have a fire in a factory. What do? I don't have the chips. I can't make handles, right? Instead of that, you should immediately adapt yourself to become to evolve with your business models, because your business model has to be a living, breathing one instead of a dead one, which you have to go and refer back. It has to solve the current 3 months or the next 3 months for me. That's called a living business model. That is where the leaders are trying. The leaders are not trained like that. Most of the leaders are trained in a very legacy manner. They wouldn't know what to do. So you have a person who is especially the governments. The governments are the dinosaurs of the world, where all their business model is it's 2 or 3 centuries older, and people who are working for it are also in that mindset. So that's where even governments have to change their business models, their enterprise models. See, who would have thought governments will ask people to work from home? Who would have thought? But they adapted. So that is how you have to adapt. But they're a living business model. And then your customer experience, right? So I was part of a startup, an IoT startup in 2015. We were making something called Smart Mirror. Smart Mirror is you were trying something in the trial room. Your mirror will actually tell you that whether that fits you. The mirror will call you okay, there is dress size doesn't fit you. You have to get something from the something from the display rack, something like that. The mirror will actually tell you. When we were doing that in 2015, it sounded so fancy. Why do you want to do that? I don't want to replace my store helper who is actually going to help the customer, right? Because it gives a more personalized experience. Now, imagine that solution right now. It's going to be hotcakes, sold like a hot cake, right? Because people are not going to buy dress right now because they are afraid of transmission. Now, a smart mirror would be the smartest thing to be put in a clothes shop, right? So these are the things that the customer experience is changing. The customers now would want robots to help them instead of assistants, right? So the entire customer experience is changing. So that is how you have to think about the next solution. And then how you are marketing, you're remodeling. Once your customer experience is changing, your marketing, people still like personalized marketing, thinking I am being taken care of. So the entire marketing has to be changed. The paradigm, there is a huge paradigm shift of marketing, because the experience, it comes from customer experience, what your customer wants, right? And then contactless sales. As soon as you don't have to wait in line. So I was actually doing a research in it's my own interest. In Lulu Mall, if you go, it's in Kochi. In Lulu Mall, if you go, it is you have everything on the shelves. You have the display shelves are very adequate. You have all the shelves with a lot of products and a lot of choice. But as soon as you stand in line with the products, it takes 1 hour for a person to check out. That is like a person like me. I don't want to wait in line for 1 hour. I would never go and visit Lulu Mall again, or I'm talking about this Hyper Mart or something like that. Yeah, I don't want to go and visit because I don't want to wait for 1 hour. 1 hour is a huge time for me. I would want to have a seamless checkout where I'm walking out, or I just have to show my wallet, my digital wallet, and I should be able to be taken care of. So things like that, contactless. You don't need a person sitting there and swiping your card, and the card doesn't work, or the swiping machine doesn't work. With all this, these are all existing technologies we are not using. It's not a new thing I'm talking about. These have been existing for some 5 years. And still you are waiting in line for 1 hour, right? So, that is I'm not going to go and purchase there again. So that is the contactless sales channels, and how the entire industry has to change, has to come. And Accenture had actually done a study, and they had said if I can do it online, I'll be doing that. That is what the new generation is going to tell a business. And one more on the living business model, which I missed, is I wanted to talk about Tata. How Tata came up with a model called ADAPT program in 2008. When a global recession, they had warnings of a global recession. They came with something called ADAPT, This is actually going to help when we research a little bit about ADAPT. ADAPT is actually action plan for downturn elevation and priority in turbulence. So they came up with a program, and the beautiful thing they did is they actually trained their employees instead of leaders and managers alone. They trained their employees. See, if there is a downturn, in business, or if there is a downturn in some of the issues, if there is a global recession, how is the employee has to cope up? Nobody does that right now. Everybody is just thrown in right on. Okay, you have work or you don't have work. You just go out and do remote work. People are just thrown into different directions. That is not good leadership. Good leadership has to make sure that the employees are trained enough to adapt and then they have to. I mean, that is, a team has to be there. Unless otherwise a good team is there, you are not going to be able to come up with a good product or a solution, right? So you have to make sure your team is aware of it and your team is trained more than anyone. So I'm going to take one use case which I'm very I like to talk about AI, artificial intelligence. I'll take two use cases. One is AI and one is blockchain. On technology front, this might go into a little bit deeper on technology, but I think we need to start talking about this on the technology front. 1 second, let me just get my notes on what I have written down. Okay. So before post-COVID, whenever I used to hear about AI, I used to just have like a soft smile, because everybody talks about AI and nobody uses AI really. People are calling aggregators of information as AI, which is not true AI. AI is something that has to learn by itself. It is something that has to give you solutions by itself once you train it. So people tell you a product is using AI, and what they are actually doing is they're collecting a lot of information. They're just doing some aggregation of information and it's telling it's AI. That is not how AI is. But right now we are in a particular stage where the real AI has to show up. So you come up with a solution, and if you tell you have AI, you have to really tell what the AI is doing. But because it is not a fancy word anymore, it is the need of the hour, right? AI is the need of the hour, and what all it can do. And I'll start with diagnosis using radiology images. So what can that AI do? It can extract a radiology image, and it can actually detect. So if you're I think around 15 years back, when I was working for healthcare, our biggest headache was how to store all these images, how to retrieve the images, how to get the doctors to read the digital images, because they are trained to read a X-ray on their hand, right? Now how to get these doctors to read and analyze. So there is a diagnosis AI engine. If I'm building a radiology diagnosis engine in AI, the AI has to read it. The AI is going to go through all these images and going to tell me, okay, you know what, this person is prone to something. This person could get a he's above 60-year-old. He has a comorbidity condition. This person might this pneumonia doesn't look good. The infection in his chest is looking a little different. It has actually has this viral strain of so and so. This is what the AI is going to tell me, and that is where the solution needs to come through. Right, and then there is going to be COVID what it has learned from COVID. All this COVID data you have to feed through the AI engines. It's going to tell you a lot of things that related to the coronavirus has a lot of different type of mutations. Whether the gene has whether the virus has mutated itself. All this information the AI should be able to tell me. So and then it's going to give me deep learning and three-dimensional deep learning on disease, whether this disease is going to it's going to sustain, or it's going to it's going to affect the health of the patient, so and so. Say you hear all this some like cancer detection comes. The doctor will comes and tells you, okay, you have only this patient only has 6 months to live. And then the doctor is actually making a judgment based on his experience. That doesn't come with the real data. But then you can see the patient living through 1 year or 2 years, right? So this is because he doesn't have enough data to do, because this is a huge database. That is where this detecting AI can come and give the accurate, almost accurate, I would say, accurate prediction of what is going to happen to a patient. So, like a disease that is, it can read populations, it can read the population density, it can read population data, and then tell us, okay, next outbreak is going to happen here or not. This is how AI is going to help you on this. And then something called disease tracking. Disease tracking is if there is it doesn't have to be a corona outbreak or a disease outbreak. It can have something like, the pattern doesn't look good. There is something going to happen here, and that those kind of predictions based on some environment factors, AI should be able to predict. And then it can also feed a lot of information to the neural networks, and then build systems and build systems out of like bidirectional systems, which can actually help the doctors on it. And it can have remedial. It can give you remedies on this is what you should be able to do. So it can tell you what you're supposed to do. So that is the kind of disease tracking it can do. And predicting outcome of patients, a health condition, which I already said, whether a patient is hospitalized. So then now the hospital will know, okay, how long he is going to be in the hospital, or how long we need to take care of him, or whether he can be sent home. And right now, this is all based on human experiences or human data or the doctor's experience, right? But now machines are going to tell you, or the algorithms are going to tell you, okay, this patient is you have to keep him for 3 more days, or you have to keep him for 2 days. Looks like he's going to be cured by 4th day. Things like that. That is based on data. Based on data, that is large, giant, big data that is being collected by the AI, because AI is hungry for data. So that's where it's going to give that. Then there is computational biology. It can bring benevolence AI, where you can actually reduce the infection. Right? What should be done for reducing the infection? What kind of medical combinations can be done? All that is coming from the computational biology. This is all going to be run through AI algorithms. And then you have protein structure prediction. So how the protein breakdown is happening. All this is it is going to take lot of enormous years if you are doing it by humans, right? So it is going to give you all these protein productions, what is the he might overcome a pneumonia. Is he going to get affected by how does this particular sample look like? All that is going to be predicted. So your Jyotisham or Jadagam is actually what AI is going to. Your health Jadagam is what AI is going to do for you. It is not right now. It's not at that stage, but eventually that is the way to that. That is the only way human beings can evolve right now. It has to have AI. And then drug discovery. We still don't have a drug, right? So we don't have a drug. We don't know whether the drug combination is going to work. This is all on human trials, right? And you use guinea pigs. So imagine with feeding of data, 50% of human trials are actually reduced. The time reduction has to happen. That is very interesting. So you can create a drug or in under 3 months, which is going to be truly helpful. And if a new bacterial strain comes, it can read all this data and tell us, okay, this bacterial strain has a similarity to so and so. Might be this drug might work. Then you feed in the drug information to the AI. Instead of feeding the drug information to guinea pigs or human beings, you can actually feed the drug information to the AI engine, and the AI engine will tell, okay, how this is going to change the disease, or how I'm going to contain the disease. And what is the first thing that is going to happen? Don Tapscott and Alex Tapscott is actually the pioneers in blockchain. And what they are sending is, there is going to be a real crisis in leadership, because now there is no other way other than go digital first, right? Digital first and digital only models. There is going to be a huge way of how leaders, because leaders are not trained in it. That's where I think, that's what I said, the current generation is going to lead, because the people who are going to manage you has no clue how to manage you, has no clue on how a digitally driven leadership has to happen. So you will have to come up with solutions, right? So it's a great opportunity where you will be even making solutions for your leaders how to manage you. Because right now, whoever has passed out of MBA in 2019 only knows what the legacy model is. Legacy model gives you basics, but it doesn't give you the enough tools to how to manage the next set of workers. And then one of the other use case I want to bring is blockchain. So what exactly is blockchain? Blockchain is actually decentralization. So if I'm spending money, if I'm actually swiping the credit card, what is going to happen is it actually goes to the server, it goes to the main credit card office, it actually verifies, it goes to the bank, then it comes and tells me. That's the waiting time, right? Then it comes and tells me, okay, this credit card is valid, this purchase is valid, this person has so and so money, this person can purchase. That is actually a huge, it's a huge, I would say, a time lapse or a time lag on getting something done. But where does blockchain comes? Blockchain is decentralizing, so it doesn't have to go to the main central server. It will have smaller units. Living in Kerala, I'm pretty sure everybody knows what decentralization is, because I think Kerala is one of the regions I have seen so much of decentralized work, community works, community hospitals, and the government's work through decentralized centralized units. So you all know your panchayat member, or you know your councillor, you know whom to ask to. You have Akshaya centers. So we have done a beautiful roadmap of decentralization. Blockchain is a similar concept. It's actually a technology tool to decentralization. That's all there to it. People will throw a lot of jargons to it, but that is all there to it. To do every task from the financial model, from work, everything can be a blockchain pattern. And blockchain is where it actually helps you. It's a technology tool, actually helps you how to manage a solution. So it has self-sovereign identity, health records, and shared data. Imagine you have this Aadhaar card, it is in a centralized location. It has to always go and check your centralized database to check the data, or your health records. Say you are walking into a hospital, and you have to either carry your entire health history with them, or imagine there is actually data available to the hospital in a hospital center, which is easily available, which can be verified very quickly than going to a central database. So this kind of identity information and health records and shared data is what blockchain is going to help. Okay, and then just-in-time supply chain solutions, as I said, right? It's going to be smaller supply chains. And imagine in supply chain, say even a hospital. Say I want to say Wayanad or Kasaragod is getting more affected. So what do? You can have mobile hospital units immediately set up, because even hospital units are part of a supply chain, right? So you can get people, you can get local people to actually supply masks. You can get the local doctors to come and then work on the supply unit, on the hospital unit, and then those will be like just-in-time supply chains. So a population is swelling somewhere. That is where I would need more hand sanitizers. Then I create a mini factory there, and then I manufacture there. So those kind of solutions can that will be aided by blockchain. Okay, and then for medical professionals, a rapid response registry. So it is not that the medical professionals don't want to help, or you hear a lot. You had a big waiting time at the hospital. They are overwhelmed, right? They are overwhelmed by capacity, and then so these solutions will actually help you come up with more quicker solutions. So you're not in the waiting room forever, 1 or 2 hours. And if you are especially in US, we all joke, right? It is till death you are waiting in a waiting room, because sometimes you go in the morning with a high fever. By the time the doctor sees you, it will be in the afternoon, and your fever will be down, or you'll be dead. So it's kind of, that's how the waiting time is. And so this all response registry and stuff like that, blockchain can actually solve. And then incentive models to reward a responsible behavior. That's a very novel concept, right? People like incentives, right? People actually behave much better, from a child to an adult, when they know there is an incentive. It can be a praise, it can be a good word, and it can be even monetary. But how do blockchain actually does that? Blockchain actually can provide how a particular community is being, a behavior is being. Say a community, let's say somebody is doing, a community is actually doing very good at health. they are keeping all the health practices. They are doing a very good sanitizing. We don't know as of now, Kerala, which place is doing the best sanitary practice. We don't know, right? But using blockchain and using enough artificial intelligence data, enough data to be fed, we can actually understand. Okay, there is a model community actually doing much better healthcare practices, and that community has to be rewarded in a particular way, at least appreciation or someone. So these kind of different patterns, blockchain can help you on that. And having said all this, I wanted to quote Deborah Spar. She is the dean for Harvard Business School Online. So she was asked in last year, not after the post-COVID, before post-COVID, 2019, when she was made the dean of school, she was asked, and imagine Harvard Business School Online. Harvard was very hesitant to start online courses because they are a very elite community, and they want their students to actually come to the campus. But even Harvard had a change of mind. They started doing Harvard Business School Online because Chinese students stopped going over to US, and then so they had to come up with new adaptive models. And then she was asked, whether the tech disruption, whether all the classes is going to be online. Similar questions are asked right now, right? Whether everything is going to be online. It is a big no. That is completely not true. It is only going to enable. People might have one day online class, the other 2 days you might be in your school, or you might be doing something online, or something virtually. The other things you have to have, you have to see people, because human beings are not going to be mentally pleased when you are just moving away from people, right? People and contact. And it's as simple as worship places. Now there are a lot of people actually watching, very eagerly watching worships happening online. Earlier it was a big no, right? You have to be in that place. So even now that is being changed, how people are, but is it going to be a constant way? No. That's where she said, when radio was discovered, we had similar conversations, whether it's everything is going to be on radio. Now people are not going to come to colleges. I mean, we know that is not true, right? So it's a similar way. That is exactly what is going to happen. So people who are going to come and predict and tell you that everything is going to change, you have to only check online, it doesn't know history. So that's where I put, right, speaking about every technology that is going to change, you also have to know it's only an enabler or a tool or a vehicle. It is not going to solve the it is not going to put human beings into a no contact world at all. Okay. With that, I want to take in some questions, and I can open the floor for that. And if you have anything, you can always contact me. I put my contact email also.
Thank you, madam, for the wonderful session. Now it's the time for a question and answer session. Now the audience can ask questions. Now it's the opportunity to ask the questions. Hello. Is there anyone for question?
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yeah.
Why Blue Ocean strategy?
What is it?
Ma'am, why Blue Ocean strategy?
Yeah, so right now Blue Ocean strategy is you have new opportunities, right? It is no longer everyone know everything, or the market has been saturated world. Now the world is into you have a ton of opportunities, and that is exactly what a Blue Ocean strategy is. Everything, I mean, every business has to be remodeled, right? So I can even come up with a simple business model of training business leaders into going into a new model, right? So even starting from basic training, there is a lot of opportunity. Instead of where everybody is killing each other for business, now we have a very calm blue ocean where more and more opportunities are going to come. So that's why I would say this is the world has changed into a complete blue ocean right now.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
If there is any other questions, the audience can type your questions in the chat box. Okay, I will read one question from Rajan Sir from Kila. What are the employment potential for MBA in new scenario?
I would say unless your MBAs are reskilled, digitally, as I said, digitally enabled, and you are thinking about a digital first solution, you are going to have trouble. But as soon as you put in your thinking hat and come up with a digital solution, or digitally enable your MBAs, or how to manage the new workforce. See, everyone put, even including governments, put everyone into work from home. But how many managers know how to manage people from work from home? I would say, like, not even 10% know that. Then, you are actually like, the managers are going to go crazy. How do I manage employees whom I'm not seeing? Because they're only used to see manage people whom they see regularly, right? So, you have to have some kind of a elective course, or, you have to have some kind of a certificate course along with your MBAs, where you need to know how to even manage people who is not directly visible to you. That's a basic you have to start from. Once you start from, you are more valuable, right? Because people are looking for managers like that right now. Right now, they want people who are digitally enabled, digitally skilled, who can think. So I don't think anywhere you learn a course, or you come up, you can just get a job. You just walk into a job. Everything requires a fine tuning. And as I said again, I'm repeating again, you shouldn't take it as a negative, like, I'm not going to have a job. I think that is a ridiculous way of thinking, because you are having an opportunity. How do you learn and how do you take that opportunity is the way you should go. We need thinking and thought leaders. We need people who are actually going to come up with innovative solutions. You need to build a career. You should not think about a job, right? So has to be a career. That is where, if you think, and MBAs especially, most of the MBAs, how they come out is like, you're trying to manage people. You have to be like, you need to more about agility managing. You need to know about agility business, and you need to know more about servant leadership. These kind of things are, I hope it is being taught in MBA schools in Kerala or India right now.
Okay, thank you, madam. Madam, what is the possibility for the add-on courses in the current scenario?
If I were running an MBA institute, I would definitely have at least a 3-month or a 4-month or course. I don't know how. I am very sorry. I'm not very used to the Kerala education system. So I would definitely have a course. If you look at Harvard or Princeton or MIT, they're all starting to add courses on how to do the new workforce management. Whatever has been taught is, you have to tear it apart and then come up with new solutions, right? So at least you have to equip your final year students on how to change, how to manage in the new world.
Okay, madam. Can you suggest few short-term courses? Again, the question from Rajan sir.
I think when people ask me to suggest books, suggest courses, that's a personal choice. I think you should do your research. As I said, you should do your research, because I have no clue what your audience is. I cannot just blindly come and say, okay, this is the course you have to take. I wouldn't do that. So I don't suggest movies. I don't suggest books, or I don't suggest courses for people. That is your research area. You need to know your audience, and that's where. And then I can help you later. If you can first do your research and homework and tell me, okay, this is what we found, and this is my audience, and this is what you earn, then I can help you. I cannot immediately suggest something, because I'm not going to sit here and suggest something with no clue on the audience.
Okay, thank you, madam. So now it's time to wind up the session. I would like to take this opportunity to express the wholehearted gratitude to Labby John, the Senior Fellow, Kerala Startup Mission, for the enlightening talk on the topic. And I thank on behalf of IEDC MEA SIMAT. It was such an authentic lecture on the topic. I would like to thank Dr. Habib Rahman, Director of MEA SIMAT, for his guidance and support in organizing this webinar. I thank Mr. Jibinen, Nodal Officer of IEDC MEA SIMAT, and also all the student coordinators who support the program and make the program possible. Thank you. Thank you so much, Shilpa, Ashna, and all student coordinators who is working under IEDC. Thank you so much. Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.